Fermentation is the process where energy is released through glucose when oxygen is not available. However, when oxygen is present, normal cellular respiration, also known as aerobic respiration, occurs. This is because oxygen is available as the final electron acceptor in the electron transport chain. We can see that if oxygen isn't available as the final electron acceptor to oxidize NADH, then the concentration of NAD+ will rapidly drop. Without NAD+, glycolysis, pyruvate processing, and the citric acid cycle will halt. So how is energy produced then? Instead of being transferred to oxygen, the electrons are transferred to pyruvate. This causes the regeneration of NAD+, which allows the cell to start glycolysis and produce. Fermentation is also known as anaerobic respiration because it occurs in the absence of oxygen. It only takes place in the cytoplasm, not like aerobic respiration, which also takes place in the mitochondria. Fermentation consists of glycolysis, which produces 2 molecules of pyruvate, in addition to 2 extra reactions that allow for the regeneration of NAD+. The extra reactions in humans produce lactic acid, and in yeast, they produce alcohol. Again, 2 pathways of fermentation that are common are lactic acid fermentation in humans and alcohol fermentation in yeast. First, let's take a closer look at lactic acid fermentation. Lactic acid fermentation regenerates NAD+ by forming lactate. It occurs when our bodies are making glucose so fast that the oxygen in the mitochondria is used up. This causes the electron transport chain and oxidative phosphorylation to shut down, so NADH cannot donate their electrons there. This causes the electrons to be donated to pyruvate instead, which forms lactate. Lactic acid fermentation occurs when we exercise. The lactate that is produced in fermentation has a proton attached to it, creating lactic acid. This acid builds up in our muscles as we are using them, until finally, the pathways to generate ATP can't keep up. At this point, muscular work must slow down or stop altogether. This causes the muscle failure that we experience when we're working out. Our muscles are not getting enough fuel to properly function. Luckily, our body can react to this deprivation of oxygen by making us breathe faster and increasing our heart rate. This gets more oxygen to our muscle cells, which revives the electron transport chain. The lactic acid that is produced by fermentation is then converted to pyruvate, which is used to derive cellular respiration in the presence of oxygen. The second pathway for fermentation is called alcohol fermentation. This occurs when the yeast grown in bread dough or grape juice quickly uses up all of the available oxygen. Again, this halts the processes that produce ATP in cellular respiration. Forming ethanol from pyruvate occurs in 2 steps. First, a carboxyl group is removed from pyruvate and released as carbon dioxide, producing a 2-carbon. Comparing aerobic and anaerobic respiration reveals that for each molecule of glucose that is oxidized, fermentation only produces 2 ATP. This is 15 times less than the 29 ATP produced during aerobic respiration. This concludes that anaerobic respiration, also known as fermentation, is highly inefficient compared to cellular respiration. The whole point of fermentation is to provide the cell with enough NAD+ to start glycolysis and produce ATP.